Hello there, Seeker of Silence, and welcome to Starforged Stories. Tonight we leave the hurried world behind and journey back to Middle-earth, where we join Master Nori deep within the archives of the Shire. Just before we begin our tale, if these quiet stories help you find the rest you seek, please remember to subscribe and join our fellowship of peace. Doing so truly helps others discover the path to peaceful slumber. But for now, let's get cozy. Settle in and let the gentle rain begin its watch. The evening had deepened across the Shire, bringing with it a profound stillness that settled like the softest dust upon the ancient fields of the West Farthing. Within the low, comforting hills, the windows of the Smiles glowed with a warm butter-yellow light, signs of suppers finished and hearths banked for the long watches of the night. It was a peace that felt as deep and rooted as the very earth beneath the hobbit's soft feet, a peace that had been fiercely guarded, often unconsciously, through the tumultuous turning of the great years. In the small but surprisingly well-stocked archives of Michel Delving, where the air was perpetually cool and scented, with the aroma of aged paper and dry summer earth, Master Nori, a dwarf of the venerable Longbeards, prepared for his nightly vigil. Nori was an anomaly in the Shire, a figure of solid rock and meticulous habit, amidst a race dedicated to comfortable spontaneity. Yet, in the quiet pursuit of historical accuracy, he and the hobbits found a rare, mutual respect. He wore a simple leather apron over his woolen tunic, and the rhythmic soft scrape of his bronze penknife sharpening a quill was, for now, the loudest sound in the entire archive. Outside the deeply set round window, the rain began. It was not the sudden violent downpour of the mountains, but a gentle, steady patter, a sound universally beloved by the inhabitants of the Shire. It was the sound of everything settling, of the world outside pausing its hurried pace, inviting contemplation and coziness. Nori adjusted the great ledger before him, its covers bound in thick green velvet, a gift from the Took clan, who had always appreciated the artistry of Dwarven craft, even if they sometimes questioned the Dwarven obsession with keeping records of every second meal. The task for the night was daunting yet calming. He was tracing the lineage of the old Took's third cousin twice removed, attempting to chart the precise moment when the blood of the fair folk might have thinned just enough to produce such whimsical eccentricity. Such was the deep lore of the Shire. The air currents within the archive were faint, almost imperceptible, carrying the subtle, reassuring fragrance of the old, hand-bound books. Some scrolls dating back to the earliest settlements smelled faintly of pipeweed and ale. Others, the academic tracts, carried the dry, crisp scent of the vellum itself, hinting at ink made from ancient berries and mineral dyes. Nori retrieved a brass key, its surface polished smooth by centuries of careful use, and inserted it into the lock of a reinforced oak cabinet. The click of the tumblers was surprisingly soft, like a gentle cough in an empty hall. He slid out the first ledger, bound in stout, unblemished leather. This was the great roll of the founding, detailing every shovel of soil turned and every quarried stone laid for the very structure surrounding him. The cover leather, though old, gave a soft, yielding sigh as Nori laid it flat upon his work table. He dipped his freshly sharpened quill into the inkwell. The resulting action was a hush and a scrape, a faint, almost secret sound designed to be heard only by the dedicated chronicler. He began to read the marginalia of the scroll he was examining, tracing the faint, hurried script left by an unknown, long-dead hobbit scholar. The marginalia detailed a curious historical anomaly concerning the very founding of Michel Delving, a small, almost irrelevant detail that only a dwarf trained in the relentless pursuit of minor facts would notice. It spoke of 3 small stones found beneath the foundation of the archives itself, stones that were supposedly too old for the Shire. Nori, having spent centuries studying the mineral lore of the Blue Mountains, knew instinctively that too old meant something profound. He set the scroll down, the silence of the room returning immediately, buffered only by the gentle drip, drip, drip of the rain finding its way down the window pane. The problem, Nori mused, was that hobbits possessed a beautiful but frustrating lack of interest in the before. Their histories tended to begin at the point of immediate comfort, the year they acquired their best armchair, the season the pipeweed crop was finest, or the generation that invented the afternoon tea party. The deep time, the echoes of the elder days, were often glossed over or simply forgotten in favor of the current comfort. But Nori, the archivist, knew that even the most peaceful peace often concealed the oldest of secrets, and tonight, with the gentle rain washing the land clean, he felt a certainty that the deep, soft heart of the Shire held a secret worth recording, a secret sleeping beneath the surface, waiting for the quiet attention of a scholarly mind. He needed to find the entry detailing those 3 stones, an entry that, logically, should not exist in the Shire's history at all. A quiet sigh escaped Master Nori's lips, quickly lost in the vast silence of the archives. The cryptic note, the mention of stones too old for the Shire, was a clear challenge to his scholarly mind. He was searching for an anomaly that, by all rights of comfortable chronology, should not exist in these halls dedicated to peace and second breakfasts. The rain outside had settled into a steady, meditative rhythm, a hushing sound that encased the archive in a soothing shell of isolation. Nori left the original scroll, his movements deliberate and quiet, mindful of the sensitive acoustics of the deep archive. The wooden floorboards, thick and ancient, only offered a minimal thud beneath his heavy boots, a sound that quickly faded. He moved towards the eastern wall, where the most sacred and least disturbed records were kept, the founding charters, the original surveys, and the highly specific deeds related to the construction of the Great Smiles and the public buildings of Michel Delving. The section smelled distinctively different from the rest of the archive, not merely of paper, but of dry earth and a faint metallic scent, hinting at the deep mineral nature of the stone foundation beneath them. Nori retrieved a brass key, its surface polished smooth by centuries of careful use, and inserted it into the lock of a reinforced oak cabinet. The click of the tumblers was surprisingly soft, like a gentle cough in an empty hall. He slid out the first ledger, bound in stout, unblemished leather. This was the great roll of the founding, detailing every shovel of soil turned and every quarried stone laid for the very structure surrounding him. The cover leather, though old, gave a soft, yielding sigh as Nori laid it flat upon his work table. The search itself was a calming, meticulous process, the opposite of any hurried pursuit. Nori used a thin, polished bone stylus to gently guide his eyes down the columns of ancient, neat script. Each entry detailed payments, materials, and notes from the chief builder, a hobbit known simply as Master Tudd, a man whose mind, clearly, contained a rare spark of dwarven precision. The stylus gave a faint, almost subliminal tick-tick as it moved over the heavy paper, tracking the relentless march of the past. He began the methodical traversal of the records, seeking any deviation, any asterisk or notation that broke the rhythmic monotony of measurements and wages. 3 yards of Shire timber felled by the great river, paid 15 pence for delivery of quarried sandstone from the Brandywine region. The cornerstone laid on the morning of Midsummer's Day, year 1400. The rain outside continued its gentle song, providing a perfect counterpoint to the quiet work. It was a shushing wave, washing over the town, while Nori delved into the deep past. He paused near the section detailing the vault's deep cellar. The builder, Master Tudd, had noted an unexpected delay. The language was typically hobbitish, disguising the severity of the event with comfortable terminology. unexpected delay in the setting of the foundation floor caused by an unusual discovery requiring careful consideration. Nori's heart gave a slight quiet thump against his ribs. This was it, the unusual discovery. The official ledger had admitted the anomaly, but now came the obfuscation. Tudd's next entry, however, was frustratingly brief. Matter resolved. The stones are dealt with, proceeding with the laying of the cellar floor per usual specification. Dealt with. The phrase offered no explanation, no description of the nature of the stones, their size, or their composition. They were simply dealt with, much like a mildly inconvenient pest or an administrative error. The dwarf's brow furrowed, the silence of the archive now feeling less comforting and more secretive. Master Tudd, despite his precision, had kept a secret from the ages, one sealed beneath the very floor where Nori now sat. He closed the heavy ledger, the thick paper giving a soft, dry rustle, and knew the official history held only part of the truth. He needed the man's private voice, the unsanitized account of fear. The official ledger lay closed, its silence not the quiet of resolution, but the deep, guarded hush of a secret properly buried. A historian knew well that what was omitted often held more truth than what was recorded. Nori pushed the great roll gently aside, the movement slow and deliberate, designed to produce only the softest scrape against the polished oak surface. Outside, the steady, driving rain had begun to soften. It lessened to a mere drizzle, a curtain of moisture that now gave the archive a diffused, quiet glow. The sound against the window was lighter now, a gentle, hypnotic tap-tap-tap that spoke of the deep night setting in and of a world at peace. It was time for a change of strategy. The greatest truths were seldom found in the great, formal rolls of history, but often in the hasty scribblings and private musings of those involved. The dwarf left the main work table, the faint swish of his woolen tunic against the stacked boxes marking his path. He moved to a darker corner of the eastern wing, a section dedicated not to official documentation, but to the more personal records of the Shire's administrative past, letters, minor grievances, receipts for large purchases, and, hopefully, private journals. This section smelled distinctly of mildew and candle wax, a scent profile far less crisp than the official halls. The dwarf's trained eye began to scan the smaller cabinets. Master Tudd, the builder, was known to be meticulous, a trait that Nori admired and hoped extended to his personal habits. A hobbit who recorded the precise cost of sandstone was surely one who recorded his own anxieties. He found a small, unmarked chest of polished oak tucked beneath a stack of old harvest reports. It was secured not by a lock, but by a simple leather strap and buckle. The dwarf undid the strap, the old, dry leather yielding with a faint, brittle crackle. Inside, nestled beneath a handful of dried pipeweed leaves, which Nori noted with a slight knowing chuff, lay a slender volume bound in worn, brown calfskin, Master Tudd's private building journal. Nori carried the treasure back to the light of his lamp. The simple leather cover felt soft and warm beneath his calloused fingertips. He opened the journal carefully. The pages were thin and brittle, and the script was a rambling, anxious hand, quite unlike the steady copperplate of the official rolls. This was the voice of a man concerned, a man slightly overwhelmed by the sheer permanence of building in stone. He turned past entries detailing mortar costs and crew complaints, guided by the familiar date of the unusual discovery. The entry, when he found it, was written in haste, the ink smudged as if the builder's hand had been shaking. Midsummer's Eve. Cannot sleep. The 3 stones are laid. They do not feel right. Not cold, not warm, but utterly neutral. I have never seen their like. When the earth was disturbed, the air itself seemed to settle. The workers refused to speak of them, calling them things that sleep beneath the old mountain's heart. I told the council the matter was resolved. What else could I do? To speak the truth would be to stop the building forever. The Shire needs its archive. I buried them deep. May the earth forget them, and may the silence hold. Nori's spectacles slid down his nose. The entry offered no geological data, no detailed drawing, but it offered something far more valuable. The fear of a sensible hobbit facing something profoundly other. The dwarf reached out a hand, tracing the smudged ink of the word silence. It was a theme that resonated deeply in the stillness of the archive. The stones were not just old, they were linked to a silence that could not be broken. He spent a slow, deliberate moment, simply absorbing the gravity of the confession, the soft tick of the grandfather clock in the distant Shire hall reaching his ears, sounding muffled and immensely far away. The dwarf knew now that the real search was not for a material object, but for the meaning of that silence. The final drop of water outside the round window made a soft, definitive plop upon the sill, marking the quiet end of the drizzle. A profound stillness settled over the Shire, a deep quiet that seemed to amplify the internal rustle of Nori's thoughts. The air, now cool and clean, carried the subtle scent of wet grass and turned earth, a familiar, comforting aroma that nevertheless held a tinge of the unsettling mystery revealed in Master Tudd's hurried script. Things that sleep beneath the old mountain's heart. The phrase lingered in the atmosphere, too ancient and too grave for the cozy halls of the Shire. If the three stones predated the Hobbit settlement, then the key to their identity would lie not in the meticulously catalogued histories of the last 3 centuries, but in the fragmented, oldest settlement records, the tales and whispers carried west by the earliest pioneers. Nori carefully closed Tudd's personal journal, securing the brittle pages with the soft, almost imperceptible snap of the leather buckle. He then returned the chest to its place beneath the stack of harvest reports. His focus shifted now to the deepest, least disturbed section of the archive, the boxes labeled with the faded script, West Farthing Earliest Lore. This corner of the archive was the coldest, smelling strongly of dust and a faint, sharp mineral quality, as if the very mountains were pressing in. The books here were irregular. Some were simple bark rolls, others brittle leather sheets folded and tied with twine. This was the raw, unpolished memory of the Shire. The dwarf seated himself again at the work table, placing a low, polished stone weight upon a fragile bark scroll to prevent it from curling. The bark gave a dry, soft crinkle beneath the stone. He scanned the entries, which were less focused on facts and more on superstitions and warnings passed down from the early generations. He was looking for mention of the heart or the sleep. The search was slow, requiring patience measured in long years, not minutes. Each sentence had to be deciphered, interpreted for the context of a people still navigating a wilder, more fearful land. Beware the turning of the long winter, when the moon hangs low and the mountain sleeps. The old men tell of a place where the earth's rhythm fails and the very rock holds its breath. These were atmospheric, evocative, but too vague. Nori moved his stylus, the quiet scritch-scritch sound providing the only evidence of his focus. He reached a scroll bound in coarse hemp and brittle with age. The title was barely legible, a compendium of the unwanted lore of the first settlers. The smell of this scroll was particularly strong, earthy and mixed with the distinctive scent of a long-extinguished peat fire. He carefully unrolled a section. The script detailed local legends encountered by the first Smile builders. There, near the bottom of a column detailing minor boundary markers, Nori found the specific reference he sought. It was a passage recorded by a settler who had wandered too close to the Iron Hills. And the mountain folk speak of the deep, silent ones, beings made of the black rock, who sleep in the mountain's heart until the stars turn to face the east. If their slumber is broken, the earth's warmth will fail, and all songs will turn to silence. Nori stopped, the stylus resting against the dry bark. Silence. Tud's own word. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit, not with logic, but with fear. The stones were not just old, they were part of an ancient, terrifying legend of primordial beings whose only defense was their own deep, earthbound sleep. The dwarf looked down at the floor, the sturdy oak planks of the archive feeling suddenly thin. He was sitting directly above where Master Tud had buried the 3 stones, above where the deep silent ones were theoretically trying to sleep. The realization was quiet, immense, and completely absorbed by the immense stillness of the archive. The simple act of building the Shire's archives had risked breaking an ancient slumber. He closed the ancient scroll with a deep, silent breath, the parchment rustling softly, and knew what his true, unspoken mission must be: to determine if the stones still slept, and how to ensure that the silence that protected the Shire remained unbroken. The transition from intellectual curiosity to immediate necessity was a subtle, almost silent event, yet Nori felt the weight of the realization settle upon his shoulders like a sudden mantle of cold stone. The deep, silent ones. The idea was absurd, fantastical, yet anchored by the genuine fear recorded in Master Tud's journal. If the stones were indeed fragments of a primordial slumber, the tranquility of the archive, the very essence of the Shire's peace, depended on their continued silence. The atmosphere in the main archive had become too loud for Nori's liking. The faint tick-tick of the distant grandfather clock and the occasional groan of the old structural timbers now seemed deafening, intrusive. The dwarf knew he must descend to the place Master Tud had designated, the heart of the foundation, the coldest point of the archive's cellar. He retrieved a small, iron-banded lantern, its glass meticulously cleaned. He favored oil lamps over candles for their steady, unwavering light, a small flame that provided clarity without the erratic flicker of doubt. He lit the wick with a long, thin match, the scratch and the subsequent whoosh of the flame being carefully muffled within the cavernous space. The light was a low, steady amber glow, casting long, dancing shadows across the rows of dusty records, giving the organized space an unexpectedly mysterious air. Nori moved towards a narrow, unmarked door hidden behind a row of seldom consulted tax records. This door led down into the deep storage cellar, the very ground zero of Master Tud's quiet crisis. He drew the latch bolt, a heavy, dry clunk, and paused, waiting for the echo to dissipate into the thick stone. The stairs were made of rough-hewn stone, leading down into a cool, airless void. The ambient sound changed abruptly. The gentle tap-tap of the outside world had vanished, replaced by the ringing silence of the deep earth. Every single sound Nori made now seemed magnified. The shuffle of his boots on the stone steps, the swish of his coat, the soft clink of the lantern's brass handle. He descended slowly, testing each step before committing his weight, his movements now dictated by the necessity of absolute quiet. The air grew immediately colder, carrying the potent scent of damp rock and miner's moss, an odor Nori recognized from his ancestral mountain homes. This was the true smell of the unyielding earth. The cellar itself was a large, low-ceilinged chamber, dominated by racks of wine and preserves, the hobbit's true treasures, stored against lean times. The foundation walls were immense, composed of enormous, rough-cut boulders. No one used this cellar during the deep night. Nori held the lantern high, the amber light struggling against the oppressive darkness. His eyes scanned the floor. It was made of thick, uneven stone flagstones, perfectly normal. The entry in Tud's journal had been too vague for a precise location, but Nori recalled the reference. The stones were dealt with, and the floor was laid per usual specification. He moved to the exact center of the chamber, directly beneath the main support beam of the archive above. This, logically, would have been the first area cleared and leveled by the builders. Here, the temperature was noticeably lower. The chill was not merely environmental. It felt absorbed, like cold air drinking the warmth out of the room. Nori knelt slowly, placing the lantern on the ground. The glow illuminated a small area of the flagstones. He used his penknife, the same bronze tool used for sharpening his quill, to gently scrape away the thin layer of dust and fine grit that had accumulated over the centuries. One of the flagstones, he realized, was different. It wasn't the sandstone common to the Shire, but a darker, heavier material. He pressed his ear close to the cold stone, listening for any sign of life, any rhythmic thrum of the ancient slumber beneath. There was only a deep, profound silence. A silence that seemed to cancel out all sound, a kind of auditory void that pressed against the eardrums. It was the silence Master Tudd had written of, utterly neutral, utterly unsettling, the silence of deep, deep sleep. Nori knew with a certainty that settled deep in his dwarven bones that he was kneeling directly over the three stones. His mission was not to excavate them, but to ensure they were never disturbed again. He pulled a small, silver-chased pouch from his apron, its contents soft and dry. The finest Shire soil mixed with dried pipeweed. He intended to reinforce the seal, to give the earth a softer blanket. The mission was now clear, to reinforce the slumber of the deep, silent ones. This required not the clangor of dwarven battle, but the quietest artistry of his people, the lore of stone and the gentle craft of permanence. Nori removed his spectacles, placing them carefully beside the glowing lantern. The silence of the cellar felt immense, pressing down, demanding a reverence that no mortal noise could break. He pulled the silver-chased pouch of earth from his apron. It contained the softest soil from the Shire's most ancient, untouched fields, mixed with dried pipeweed leaves, a gesture of hobbit comfort, a soft, familiar scent that might act as a blanket against the cold, unnerving neutrality of the stones beneath. He opened the pouch carefully, the fine, dry soil giving a slight, whispered shush as he poured a small amount onto the flagstone. Nori then began his work. He used his bronze penknife not for cutting, but for spreading the soil, gently brushing the fine particles into the narrow seam of mortar surrounding the darker, distinct flagstone. The action was slow, repetitive, and entirely controlled. The sound was a soft, almost imperceptible whisper of bronze against stone, a sound that felt more like a breath than a tool's work. He worked in the deep, low glow of the lamp, his movements casting huge, slow-moving shadows upon the racks of preserves behind him. As he worked, he began to chant, but without sound. His voice remained internal, using only the deep, resonant echoes of his dwarven mind to recall the ancient lore of the earth. He recited the names of the deepest, oldest mountains, the songs sung by the first dwarves, who had carved their halls not to conquer the stone, but to coexist with its ancient sleep. He focused on verses about stillness, about the unbreakable promise of the rock, about the long, slow rhythm of geologic time. Let the earth forget them. May the silence hold. Tudd's anxious prayer was now Nori's meditative mantra. The small, dark flagstone seemed to absorb the dwarven chant, and the hobbit soil instantly. Nori pressed his ear to the ground again, the stone cold and unyielding against his cheek. The silence was still there, but perhaps, only perhaps, the chilling void had been replaced by a quiet solidity. He then retrieved a small, finely carved piece of jade from an inner pocket. Jade, the dwarves knew, held the memory of water and the persistence of soft growth, the opposite of cold, black rock. He placed the jade upon the flagstone, leaving it as a silent sentinel, a beautiful distraction meant to draw the slumbering essence of the stones into a gentle, flowing dream of rain and moss. He spent another long, slow period of time simply kneeling in the silence, listening to the vast, empty stillness of the foundation. He heard no sound from above, no hint of the comfortable hobbit world, only the quiet, profound hush of the deep earth. His work was done. He had found the secret, and by choosing quiet lore over loud action, he had ensured the silence that protected the Shire remained unbroken. The mission below was complete. Nori rose slowly, feeling the slight ache in his knees from the prolonged stillness, a reminder of his own mortality amidst the ancient geology of the mountain. He retrieved the iron-banded lantern, its amber light providing a welcome contrast to the oppressive chill of the floor. The chill lingered, but the unnerving void of the silence felt less potent, buffered now by the intentional presence of the Shire's softest soil and the smooth, gentle jade. He turned toward the rough-hewn stone steps, his ascent marked by the same slow, deliberate pace as his descent. His heavy boots made only the faintest shuffle upon the stone, a sound he meticulously controlled. The climb was a quiet process of physical re-entry, moving from the profound stillness of the deep earth back towards the contained, quiet order of the archives above. As he reached the narrow, hidden door, he paused, listening one last time to the silence of the cellar. There was only the faint, distant drip of condensation running down the raw stone walls, the benign sound of water and rock, signifying no malice. He drew the latch bolt back across the frame, the final clunk of the iron sounding loud and conclusive in the quiet space, sealing the truth once more. Back in the main archive hall, the atmosphere was immediately warmer, softer, and filled with the familiar, comforting scent of aged paper and pipeweed. The reading lamp still burned with its steady, clean radiance. Nori returned to his work table, placing the now smudged ledger of the founding rolls back into the cabinet with gentle care, ensuring the lock's click was precise and final. He opened a fresh, unblemished sheet of heavy Dwarven parchment, reserved only for records of high importance. Nori knew the truth of the stones was not one to be entered into the public record. To record fear was often to invite it. His duty as a scholar and guardian of peace was to document the secret only for the lineage of archivists who might come after him. He dipped his quill into the inkwell, the faint hush of the ink a soothing sound. His script began, precise and neat, starkly contrasting with the hurried script of Master Tudd. Midsummer's Eve, year 1400. Records confirm an unusual discovery at the Foundation's heart. Subsequent personal logs confirm the discovery involved artifacts of unknown, ancient geology. Matter designated, the Deep Silence. My findings confirm that the artifacts represent a state of profound, undisturbed sleep connected to the mountain's elder lore. No action is required except the preservation of the current state. He then meticulously detailed the method of preservation, the nature of the Shire soil, the placement of the jade, and the importance of absolute silence within the central section of the cellar. The quill made a clean, methodical scritch-scritch sound, lending order to the ancient chaos. He signed the bottom with his full Dwarven name, Master Nori, archivist and keeper of the quiet lore. He carefully sealed the parchment, rolling it tightly and securing it with a ribbon of undyed linen. This document, the Archive of Deep Silence, he tucked into a hidden recess behind the cabinet containing Master Tudd's diary, a place where only a meticulous scholar, deliberately tracing the steps of anxiety, would ever find it. The immense, unsettling gravity of the secret was now contained, sealed beneath stone, tucked behind wood, and bound within the quiet, dense script of Dwarven parchment. Nori felt a profound sense of relief, not the sudden release of tension, but the slow, deep subsidence that follows the completion of an important and necessary task. He returned to the main work table, pushing the remnants of the evening's unusual pursuit, the stray dust and the empty silver pouch to one side. He opened the velvet-bound ledger once more, returning his focus to the matter of the old Took's third cousin twice removed. The contrast between the ancient primordial fear in the cellar and the gentle, almost trivial concern of hobbit genealogy was immense, yet strangely comforting. The hobbits, in their meticulous charting of family lines and mealtimes, were unknowingly building a persistent everyday kind of magic, a shield of uninterrupted coziness against the wild, dark truths of the world. Nori picked up his quill again. The action was familiar, the ink running smooth and black onto the clean page. The sound of his steady, careful writing provided a grounding, rhythmic scritch-scritch that spoke only of order and peace. He charted the lineage, noting the passing of silver spoons and the inheritance of particularly fine armchairs. Every entry was a small tribute to the persistent, deliberate comfort of the Shire. The ambient sound in the archive was perfect now. The rain had ceased entirely, and the outside world was defined only by the deep, pervasive hush of the sleeping Westfarthing. The air was cool, smelling faintly of the fresh, wet earth brought up from the cellar, but that scent was quickly diluted by the dominant fragrance of old books and dried pipeweed. He paused his work, raising his eyes to the round window. The glass was now clear, and through it Nori could see the deep, cold black of the true night. Above the black, the stars were beginning to emerge, sharp, distant pinpricks of light that reminded him of the vast, cold stillness of the cosmos. It was the antithesis of the Shire's warm, soft earth. The dwarf leaned back, the leather of his stool offering a soft, subdued creak. He understood then the true nature of the great slumber he had sought to protect. The peace of the Shire was not accidental. It was actively maintained by the small, rhythmic, persistent choices of its inhabitants, the gentle thump of the flour sifter, the soft tinkle of the tea service, the deep collective sigh of a community settling down. He realized the irony. The dwarves sought the deep secrets of the earth's heart, disturbing its slumber for mithril and gold. The hobbits, unknowingly, were the perfect keepers of the earth's peace, content with the surface, never desiring the wealth or the danger that lay beneath. Their innocence was their greatest defense. Nori dipped his quill once more. He would continue his work, tracing the lines of comfort, ensuring that the peaceful history of the Shire was preserved, knowing that every perfectly recorded family tree and every charted third cousin was another stitch in the great soft blanket of lore that kept the primordial silence undisturbed. The subtle scratch of his quill was his own quiet act of protection. The deep stillness of the archive had reached its zenith, the hour when the night feels most absolute, poised just before the soft, slow promise of dawn. Master Nori felt the profound quiet settling into his own bones, a natural tiredness that followed a long vigil and the successful conclusion of a grave, secret task. His eyes, though still keen, felt heavy, and the amber light of the reading lamp seemed to soften, drawing the edges of the room into a gentle, blurring haze. He carefully finished the entry he was working on, a meticulously detailed record of a wedding gift involving a silver-clasped spice box, and laid his quill down. The sound of the bronze pen settling onto the oak desk was a soft, metallic clink, quickly absorbed by the surrounding silence. He had done enough. The Shire's history was in order, and its hidden peace was sealed. Nori pushed his chair back, the muffled creak of the old leather, a final sound of work completed. He rose and began the small familiar ritual of closing the archives for the brief remaining hours of deep night. This involved softly extinguishing the lamps, a sequence of gentle ritualistic motions that were as calming as they were necessary. He first attended to the great main lamp on the central desk, He gently adjusted the flow of oil, then lowered the wick with a specialized brass tool. The light did not go out abruptly. It dwindled, sinking into the oil until it was a mere spark, a point of warm ember glow that faded to a wisp of smoke and a faint, warm scent of refined oil. The archive immediately grew darker, softer, illuminated only by the residual light filtering in from the single small moon hanging low over the west farthing. He then moved through the aisles, checking the windows, ensuring the soft thud of the latches was secure against the cool night air. He gathered the stray scrolls, rolling them gently, the dry parchment giving a soft, soothing rustle as it was returned to its proper shelf. The air in the archive was now imbued with the scent of pipeweed, old paper, and cool, damp earth, a tranquil olfactory mix that was deeply conducive to rest. Nori moved towards his own small sleeping chamber, a low door built into the back wall, almost hidden by a tapestry depicting a remarkably complex hobbit harvest feast. Before entering his chamber, he paused, looking out of the round window one last time. The moon had dipped lower, and the vast, peaceful darkness of the Shire lay utterly still. He could perceive the soft, quiet hush of the breeze moving through the unpicked fields, a long, deep sigh from the land itself. Nori finally entered his chamber, a tiny, snug space that smelled pleasantly of clean linen and wood smoke. He removed his heavy woolen tunic and his leather apron, hanging them on a wooden peg. The final act was to bank the small, low fire in the hearth. He used a small iron shovel to softly settle the glowing coals, the fine ash giving a soft, whispering tsh sound, smothering the flame down to a deep ruby glow. He settled onto his cot, the rough linen of the sheet giving a slight crinkle beneath his weight. The deep stillness of the Shire's midnight vigil, amplified by the heavy stone walls, enveloped him. Nori closed his eyes, his mind finally drifting away from the scrolls and the ancient silent stones, allowing the deep, undisturbed peace of the West Farthing to pull him into sleep. Roteiro do Starforge Stories, parte 10, conclusão suave. Título: The Archives of Michel Delving, Cozy Hobbit Lore, ASMR Tale for Deep Sleep. Parte 10, aproximadamente 5. Zerso Caracteres. The sleep that claimed Master Nori was deep and instantaneous, the well-earned rest of a soul settled and a duty fulfilled. The silence he had guarded beneath the foundation now returned the favor, cloaking the archives in a peace so profound that even the light seemed hushed. The hours passed slowly, measured only by the steady internal rhythm of the mountain itself. The ember of the fire in Nori's small hearth glowed with a deep ruby persistence, providing a faint, soft hum of warmth battling the cold air. From the distant Shire Hall, the muffled, slow tick-tock of the grandfather clock was the only constant companion in the vast stillness. Outside the round window, the night began its slow surrender. The deep, black canvas of the sky softened to a dark, smoky indigo, then gradually to the pale, cool grey that signals the true approach of morning. The stars, which Nori had seen so clearly, retreated with grace, leaving the quiet world below to its own peaceful reckoning. The air began to stir again, not with the hurried wind of the mountains, but with the gentle, cool breath of the Shire's morning. The scent of wet grass and fresh dew returned, mingling with the old reliable fragrance of pipeweed and earth. Nori remained deep in slumber, but the world around him was beginning to wake, not with jarring clamor, but with a slow domestic promise. The first sound was the soft, distant tinkle of a milk pail being set down near a nearby smile, the sound of a hobbit beginning the day, utterly oblivious to the ancient, profound secret sealed beneath their feet. The dawn was an invisible, gentle force, slowly illuminating the contents of the archive. The light touched the great leather ledgers, the fragile vellum and the sturdy oak cabinets. Everything was exactly as it should be, peaceful, ordered, and utterly safe. The archives of Michel Delving held their secrets well, guarded by the deep earth below and the gentle, persistent rhythm of hobbit life above. The mystery of the deep silent ones was now part of the deep lore of the archive, a secret understood only by a few, a truth that required silence and contemplation rather than conflict. The Shire continued its long, slow, quiet journey through time, protected by a profound slumber that would likely never be broken. The last sound to reach the listener's ears is the return of the gentle, familiar background ASMR, the very soft, distant patter of the dew dropping from the eaves, the subtle, enduring hush of the breeze over the hills, and the profound silence that lies beneath all sound, holding the peace of Middle-earth secure.